All right, so this statement is being taken in reference to Internal Affairs Case Number A Alpha 2023-0023. I'm Sergeant Matthew Reynolds of the Port St. Lucie Police Department, and I am the investigator in charge of this case. This interview is being conducted in the Office of Professional Standards in the Port St. Lucie Police Department on March 8, 2024. Time is 10:05. Also, nobody else is present in the office. Captain Robert Fonteyn, you are being questioned as a part of an official investigation by the Port St. Lucie Police Department Internal Affairs Section. You are involved as the subject of the complaint. To show that the investigation is accountable, this interview is required by state law to be taped. Therefore, the interview will be recorded and there will be no unrecorded questions. You are entitled to all the rights and privileges guaranteed by the laws in the Constitution of the State of Florida and the Constitution of the United States, including the right not to be compelled to incriminate yourself to result in criminal charges. You also have the right to have an attorney or representative of your choice present during the questioning. You are ordered to give a statement for administrative purposes and to respond to all questions asked. You will be asked questions specifically, directly, and narrowly related to the performance of your official duties and or your fitness for office. Neither your statement nor any information or evidence which is gained by reason of such statement can be used against you in any subsequent criminal prosecution, with the exception of perjury or false statements. Once you have received notification of the investigation's completion or notification of discipline, the case conclusion will be public record and reports may be obtained. You may contact Internal Affairs at any time about the case to inquire about its status or to give new information. It is the responsibilities of Internal Affairs to treat you with courtesy and respect. If you feel that you have not been treated in such a manner, you should voice that during your taped interview. After this interview, as the investigation continues, additional questions requiring clarification may arise. If there are additional questions and you are re-interviewed by Internal Affairs, the same rights and requirements applicable to this interview remain in effect. You are held accountable for the truthfulness of all statements made to Internal Affairs regarding this investigation. It is recommended that you furnish Internal Affairs with any information that will support your testimony, such as physical evidence, witnesses, video and audio recordings, photographs, reports, etc., even if that information is not requested. Failure on your part to make Internal Affairs aware of pertinent information during this interview may result in an allegation of untruthfulness. If it can be proven by a preponderance of evidence that you failed to provide information as an elusive strategy intended to deceive the investigative outcome, you will be charged with an offense of untruthfulness. As a note to law enforcement officers only, untruthfulness will also cause the investigation to be forwarded to FDLE, Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission for certification review, regardless of the determination for or against disciplinary action by the Port St. Lucie Police Department. I've been directed by the Chief Richard Del Toro to conduct an internal investigation into the allegations that were outlined in the memorandum provided to you on February 1st, 2024. The specific focus of the investigation is alleged inefficiencies of duties. Do you understand these advisements as I've read them to you?
I do.
Okay. Do you have any questions or concerns about these advisements before we proceed?
No.
Are you aware of this interview is being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. As we discussed prior, if you can initial on those lines, sign, and today is the 8th of March. All right, Captain Robert Fonteyn, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you please state your name, rank, and current assignment?
Robert Fonteyn, Captain, and I am currently assigned to the Neighborhood Policing Bureau, Uniform Patrol Division.
Okay. How long have you been employed by the Port St. Lucie Police Department?
24 years.
Okay. Prior to this interview, I presented you with a copy of the Police Officer's Bill of Rights. Do you acknowledge receiving and understanding this document?
Yes.
Okay. I also presented and had you sign the Garrity Warning and Confidentiality Notice. Do you acknowledge receiving and understanding these documents?
Yes.
Okay. I also presented you with the related witness statements, documents, and evidence related to this investigation, specifically items 1 through 39 for your review. Do you acknowledge receipt of these items?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any materials, documents, recordings, or other miscellaneous items that you have knowledge of or believe may be important to the investigation that I should seek out or know about?
No.
Okay. Are there any witnesses or other parties that have knowledge of or you believe have information important to this investigation that I should seek out or know about?
No.
Okay. I'm just going to be, you may see me ticking as I go down. It's just for tracking. It's not, that I'm interested in certain things that you might be saying. At the time, so going to the Calvin Berry death investigation, at the time of the second investigation, or when it was reopened, that you were involved with Mr. Berry's death, what was your role?
I was the sergeant, and I was assigned to CID at the time, and essentially overseeing the ground level investigation by the detectives.
Okay. And who were your supervisors in the chain of command at that time?
I reported to Commander Casey Donnell.
Okay. At that time, I don't recall at that time, did we have, was it lieutenants?
No.
Okay, it was just commanders over there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, what was so going to, referring to the evidence documents 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, it's titled The Case of Interest. So I'm going to refer to those documents. Can you tell me who that document was prepared for, or is prepared for?
That is prepared for the chief and his staff to review on a weekly basis, typically.
Was this done during CORE or STARCOM, or was this a separate meeting that the chiefs were involved?
It was a separate meeting that we would have weekly, Commander Donnell and the CID sergeants, and then this was typically information that eventually ended up in STARCOM.
Okay. So there's a number of bullet points and questions and things in this document.
Right.
Can you tell me who prepares the bullet points for those?
We submit the information, the sergeants, when I say we, so I would typically go on there and send that information or add it to that. There were times where the commander's administrative assistant might go in there and organize it a little better, or you could send the information to her. Generally, I would go on there and do it myself.
Okay.
And then it would go to the commander, and we would have our meeting, and ultimately, you'd flesh out what was in here through conversation or additional investigation, and it would lead to what was eventually presented in STARCOM. So this might not be a verbatim. This is kind of a living document, so to speak.
So I might be getting ahead of myself, but this is a work product. This
Yes.
isn't like a final report.
No.
What's in here is not necessarily what may be reflected in supplements or what may go to court or anything like that.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So, and you kind of answered it, but my next question was, is the information in here prepared by somebody else, maybe utilizing notes? And you said it could have been the admin assistant or somebody else adding information in there.
Right. It would. How busy I was on a given week, crime could determine that, and if I was pressed for time or under the gun, I could send my notes to the administrative assistant, and she could put them in there.
Okay.
I didn't do that a lot, but there were times where I would do that and send it to them and rely on them to get that information in there, and knowing full well when I would meet with the commander during our weekly cases of interest meeting, if there were discrepancies in there, I could sort that out in our conversation.
Got it. Can you tell me who the intended audience for this document was?
This would be command staff, chief of police, assistant chiefs, and my commander.
Okay, and you kind of went into it, but I just cover my bases. So the function of this document was notes for meetings that you would have with the command staff, and then ultimately it would guide what may end up in the supplements or reports, final reports, or what may up in STARCOM. Is there anything else?
No.
Okay. And I just asked this: would this document be considered a report, or is it more of a work product?
It's a work product.
Work product. Okay. So again, boiling down into the bullet points, what's included in here? Are these verifiable facts, or are they noted statements from interviews? Is it follow-up questions? Like what kind of?
It's a combination of. I wouldn't go so far to say they're noted facts, but it could be a combination of things. Action items, so to speak, like what we have forthcoming, what a detective or stuff we're working on that we want the chief to know kind of where a case is at, or I want the commander to know here's where we're at, here's where we're looking at going, and this could be what we've done up to this point.
So you actually have it turned to, I have evidence 12. So it says follow-up questions from Chief Bullock. So just as that as an example, those maybe questions, not necessarily that he's proposing to you guys, but that could be something from an investigative standpoint. You know, they went out and talked to somebody, and now there's maybe a conflict for statements, so you're like, hey, we need to follow up. That's what these questions are. It could be coming from that, or it could be coming from an outside source. In this case, maybe even Ms. Mullings could be offering something that he wants you guys to answer.
Absolutely.
Is that how these questions are generated?
Yes.
Okay.
They could be from him. They could, again, like I said, they could be from him. They could be from one of the assistant chiefs, or anyone in the chain of command that has view over this. If they want something done, it gets put in there. And we call that an action item. Follow up questions from the chief, and we got to run those down.
Okay. So it's not that whatever individual may be noted in here, they're not questioning necessarily the integrity of the investigation. It's just saying, hey, either I directly have a follow-up from what was stated before, or, hey, this might be a concern. Can we address that?
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. So the case of interest documents, Ms. Mulling references, so I'm going back to her complaint now, and she references this document. She says that there are conflicting statements that you provided between what Dr. Sarkar made. Let me flip to that. These are not my highlights. Those are how it came to us. So, Dr. Sarkar made regarding the decedent's use of over-the-counter medications, i.e. Benadryl. So, one statement she says Dr. Sarkar was aware of all of Mr. Berry's prescribed medications and over-the-counter medications, and then she provides a list, or the document provides a list there. And then the next bullet point she says is a contradiction to the upper bullet point, saying that Dr. Sarkar did not monitor his intake of over-the-counter medications. So with all that, those 2 points there, my question is, do you view that there is a conflict in both those statements?
No.
Okay. How do you rectify that?
Monitoring and being aware are two different things. You know, my doctor I may disclose that I'm taking a certain medication when I go to an orthopedic doctor, so they know I'm taking it, but they're not monitoring my intake. They're not doing my blood work. You know, I'm getting treated for an orthopedic injury, so to speak. That's the way I view that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, if you're going to, like you said, an orthopedic, but in this case, Benadryl, you're taking an allergy medication. Right. You may note that on a form, I'm taking this, but that doctor's not monitoring how much you take.
Correct.
Because that's not under his purview.
Right.
Okay, so it's not a conflict. They're both true statements, can be independent. That's how you read it. Okay. And that was, so these two statements are recorded statements of something that a doctor said, but they're not conclusions made by an investigator.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, and I'm not saying that you made those, but however they made it in here, that's what those are.
Yes.
Okay. The next portion I'm going to ask you about is where she at this highlighted section right here on evidence 14 for the record. So these are statements made by Bernadine Alexander that was interviewed, and this is in the case of interest document. As far as attesting to the authenticity or truthfulness of the statement, were these put in here because they were made? You guys have tested the veracity of those, or is it just put it in there merely as a record of what was said?
It's a record of what was said. You know, the detective went and met with this person or spoke to him. I don't know if this was an in-person or over the phone conversation, but the detective contacted Bernadine, and that's their summary, so to speak, of, you know, that is likely not a verbatim summary, and that's what ends up in here, you know.
So if the subject, Ms. Alexander, had made I'll even say a misleading or false statement, or even made an error, a simple Scribner's error, that's not necessarily we're not taking that into consideration. It was included in this document just as a summary of what was stated.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they could tell us anything. You know, we're going to document what we're being told, whether they're giving us their opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean it's fact, but that's the basis of the conversation.
Okay. To the next section. Give me just 1 second. All right, so in page 24, 25. What is in the front? These pictures right here. So going to the title of this document, or the header on the top says Althea Berry 2021-05-365, which I believe is the last of the case number. It says video interview, and then it has date and time, 4/12/22.
Right.
So I'm referring to this. Ms. Mullings alleges you failed to use your position to collect information from Ms. Althea Berry. During your interview with her on the 12th, this is a transcript from that interview. Do you recall the specific portion of the interview?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you recall the sort of questions that you just? It's a long interview. It's almost an hour. Do you
Right.
recall generically the purpose of what you were going there, what you guys were trying to sort out?
Well, essentially, the belief was not by us at the time, but you know, the belief was that Althea had some type of hand in her husband's passing, and naturally, that's somebody we're going to interview anyways. When the death of a loved one occurs, we're going to speak to that person. I know the initial detective had spoken to her early on in the case, but we brought this was brought to the table again, I believe, at some point, whether it was by the chief or Miss Mullins or both, and this was the result of that.
So during this interview, it was detective, I don't know if her name changed, it was either Chima or Fraga,
Right.
was in there with you.
Yes.
As well. So the sort of questions that you asked was about Benadryl use, the statements to 911, any other family encounters. But during this interview, was Miss Berry, was she considered a suspect of a crime, a witness, or merely the spouse of a decedent? What were you guys questioning her as?
She was considered the spouse of the decedent at this point.
Okay, because this wasn't the first interview that you guys had with her.
It may have been the first one I have. I don't remember if I've had a
with the investigation.
Yes,
not the first
for
one.
me, yes.
Okay, because this is almost a year after the incident.
Right.
Okay. So Ms. Mullings also stated that you provided later, which is what this orange highlighted section is, that you provided legal advice to Ms. Berry to obtain a lawyer and sue her to stop her from making accusations. Do you recall that portion of the interview?
I do.
Okay. So from the context of this interview, it's towards the end, you guys are wrapping up. You'd already answered the questions about, you already garnered additional information about the 911 call, the Benadryl use. I'm using the brand name. I don't know what the actual name they told you what it was.
Diphenhydramine.
Very, very good memory.
Yes.
And then the family encounters after that. So that's the context. This has already happened. You guys are at the end of the interview, and Miss Berry's expressing feelings of being harassed by Miss Mullings. So if I read this statement, I want to ask if you think that this is you providing legal advice. So you say, we can't. So she said, Miss Berry says she makes your life feel so miserable. You reply, but we can't control that. I mean, you are certainly welcome to pursue legal action through a lawyer. If you want to try and get her to stop, you could go that route. That's not something we can give out. Do you believe that that's providing legal advice?
No.
Okay. How would you
I would
describe the basis?
equate that as throughout my career, somebody's being arrested or being taken to jail, their loved ones, what do we do? How do we get them out? And I would tell them, open the phone book, pick out a bail bondsman, and they'll walk you through the process. It's the same thing when I tell people to retain an attorney, so to speak. She was expressing her disdain for the fact that she felt like she's being maligned on social media, and that's not something we're going to pursue, name calling or someone accusing you of something on social media. But you're welcome to pursue that through your own legal terms. Where I think it would have gone too far is if I recommended a specific attorney for her, maybe.
And that was my next question. So it's not captured on here, but even after the recorded interview, you didn't say, "Hey, go see, Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith," and or give her several references. You didn't refer any specific attorneys. You just said, "Hey, this is an option." I mean, you even say at the end, "That's not something we can give out." So
right, yeah. She wanted to know how she could remedy that, and it's not, like I said, it's not a criminal matter that we're going to pursue. That's more of a civil issue or libelous or something along those lines, which she would have to pursue through legal counsel. Okay. I would tell anybody that.
So also from it's page 24 of 25. It's my evidence number 9 from the same interview. Again, these highlights were not from me. This is how it came in. So where you're speaking here, if you just want to read the pink section, Ms. Mullings makes an allegation of that. She says that you falsely attributed her statements, Ms. Mullins' statements. She says she didn't make those, what you told Ms. Berry concerning the interview. It's about how... Can you tell me the context of those statements and maybe where those came from?
So I had spoken to Miss Mullings several times early on in the investigation. She would call periodically to check the status of it, and she would tell me her feelings on what she felt happened to her brother. And I would always ask her, do you have anything to support your feelings, essentially? What can you give me to support your theories or your feelings? And other than a feeling, and I remember a couple times specifically, I feel it in my bones. Other than that, she never had anything tangible that we could work with to provide, other than the fact that she believed what her version of events were.
Okay. All right. So Ms. Mullings also alleges that you ignored several statements made by Ms. Althea Berry that, as she said, quote, clearly showed and could be considered incriminating. She also indicates that you ignored several incriminating statements that contained, quoting her, a significant amount of deception and deflection. So based off those portions of her allegation, how would you characterize Ms. Berry's overall statements during your interviews and time together?
She was very forthright. Sometimes, she had questions about just the process in general, essentially why are we here all this time later revisiting this, but she was not deceptive with us at all. I didn't get that impression from her.
Okay, that's my next question. Do you believe she was being deceptive? So you don't think any of her statements she was being deceptive with you guys?
No.
Okay. Do you recall Ms. Berry making any incriminating statements during the interview with her?
No.
Did you and any other detectives, Detective Chima or Fraga, depending on what her last name was at the time, did you guys have any discussions afterwards that maybe she brought up any concerns about something that might have been incriminating that she stated?
No.
Okay. Did the investigation prove or corroborate that Ms. Berry made incriminating statements or any statements that could have been considered incriminating?
No, it did not.
Okay. All right, so specifically, these two questions are pretty direct. She's alleging these, so I'm just going to come out. Have you hidden any evidence related to Mr. Berry's death?
No.
Okay. Did you produce a false or misleading report regarding Mr. Berry's death?
No.
Okay. finally that I have for you. Ms. Mulling's writings, she included references to racism by the department, not necessarily by you, but by the department throughout the investigation. So in addition to your chain of command, you said Captain or Commander Donnell was in your chain of command that you reported to. Were there any other investigators or civilian staff who participated in the investigation that were of a different race, color, gender, or national origin than you?
Commander Donnell.
Okay. And then Detective Fraga?
Yes.
She's a minority.
Yes, she is.
Anybody else
No.
that you know of? Okay. Did anybody involved in the investigation bring up racism as a factor?
No.
Okay. So is there anything that you have knowledge of or believe may be important to the investigation that I've failed to ask you or should be included in this statement?
No.
Okay, has everything you said here today been the truth?
Yes.
After the statement is concluded, you should contact me with any information you might recall, learn, or that you know may believe is important to this investigation. This concludes the interview in reference to Internal Affairs case number A-Alpha 2023-0023. The time is now approximately 10:31 hours.